Good morning. I'm from Alliander. I'm a strategy consultant. And Alliander is a company that puts tubing and cables in the ground and transports electricity and gas to your homes and offices. Now, normally that is not a very exciting thing to do. You do that, and every 40 years you go back and you have a look whether the cables and tubes are still okay. That's basically it, and if they're not, you have some work or some maintenance to do. Now, having said all that, there's a few things that change the game for us, and there's a few things that sort of make us wanting to move to the cloud because it's handy, because it's fast, because it's elastic. So I have 5 things for you today. I will describe what is hitting us as a grid operator. I will describe how it hits us and where cloud does come in handy for us, what it means from an operational point of view or from a practical point of view. And I will tell you what we learned while adopting cloud. One of the things that is hitting us is your electric car. Now, why? One car takes, depending on the speed of charging, between 1 household and 10 households worth of electricity. So if we all come home at 6 o'clock in the evening, then out go the lights. We can't have that. We also cannot just change the infrastructure, because if we want to do that, it will set us back roughly between 10 and 15 billion euro, and there's no volunteers to pay the bill. There's people that go off-grid. They have their own power, they have their own heating. They don't need the grid anymore. Now, this is not usually the poor people. This is the affluent people who can afford the electric vehicles. So they can be completely self-sufficient in whatever they do, and they can leave the grid, and then the poor people will have to pay for the infrastructure because they can't leave the grid, they don't have these homes, and they don't have the solar panels on their roof. There is houses and offices that actually produce more than they consume. Now, the grid has been designed to transport electricity and gas from central plants to your homes and offices. It's one-way traffic, the idea. This is wrong because they run up the wrong way of the road. They go back to the central. If you have solar panels, you only get the power flowing when your voltage is just a tiny bit higher than the neighbors. Now, what happens if we have a whole neighborhood with solar panels and the power goes up? We actually had one of these neighborhoods where there was so many solar panels that the voltage was too high, and then out go the lights. And you start up again, you start the electricity up again, and then out it goes because there's too much power. In Germany, 8 May this year, they actually had to pay the customer to use electricity because there was simply so much wind, so much solar power. It was tremendous. You see what the price does in this point in time. So we want to protect our assets to avoid increased bills where the EU wants the bills to decrease. We want to protect our assets from being depleted in a very fast manner because the poor people will foot the bill for our assets and for the maintenance and for the upgrades. So the swings in the grid will be bigger. There will be bigger production, there will be bigger demand. So if we don't upgrade the grid, then we have to start working smarter, not harder. And one of the solutions is we change the Netherlands in one big copper plate. Okay, that's an expensive solution. But maybe if we automate everything we do, then it might be smarter and we might avoid to invest a lot of money in the grid. So What happens is that we were once an integrated company called Nuon, and then the government decided that we had to split up. We are the grid operator and Nuon is the sales and production company, so we said goodbye and we had a nice, well-defined bit of tasks that we were supposed to do from a legal point of view or from a regulatory perspective. And what we did, we managed to grid, so it's like your roads, there's traffic on your roads and you have to make sure that there's not too much traffic because then it will blow, it will not function. You will have to make sure that it's not underpopulated as well, and you have to balance out the production and the consumption in a decent manner. We also had to do some maintenance on the grid because things wear out, even cables or the couplings between cables sometimes don't function, so you have to do some maintenance in the field. And you see here the people also changing the meters in your home for a smart meter. Now that is something new because we did place meters in all the homes, but we may have done so 80 years ago. And now we have to place these smart meters. They are going to help, by the way. So if we want to work smarter, we have to think of ways where we can actually steer your demand or your production of energy in a manner that sort of protects from depleting our grid or hurting our grid. So we have a lot of new ideas that we test in small companies. So we have a lot of startups, we have a lot of participations. You see, this is not a single grid operator anymore. We have 30 startups at least and participations. And we have maybe tens or hundreds of experiments. And I will tell you about a few of them. This is the one on the upper left is what happens to the grid, so the way things might cooperate together. And we do that by providing things for the community. So suppose that you think you go off grid with your office or your township or maybe even your neighborhood, and you have a collectively bought solar panel, battery, whatever you need to get you off grid. We will provide you with a platform that will allow you to do energy trades with other people that are off grid and maybe even use our grid as a sort of backup. So we provide the platform that is the exit one left, on lower left. The electric vehicles, most people cannot park the electric vehicle in front of their house, so they need charging points. What we do is we place charging points. That's Allego. We do that, for example, in Berlin. We have smart society services that allows to have a platform where you can link your energy production or energy consumption stuff and sort of make it talk to others. So it's a generic platform that allows you to have your IoT systems talk to each other no matter what language or protocol they use. And then we have SimSy, which is a dependency analysis tool for infrastructure. So if there is big perturbances, then we can see where they might happen in future or where they should be prevented from. Now, this is only 5 out of 30. What does this have to do with cloud? There we go. You see our tasks that we have been given by the government. They're the blue and purple ones. And you see some of the new ventures that we run. And you see that there's a big difference in the necessity or in the advantages of cloud for all these activities. And we see them mainly in the newer activities because you have the speed to market, you have the elasticity, you have the things that are ready to use right now in 5 minutes instead of having to have your whole maintenance and your whole data center change something. So we see that there's different use cases for it. We see also that there's different advantages at various places in the company. Then, is DevOps helping anyway? Well, we see that there's a bit of advantages of DevOps as well. But we try to install DevOps, and what we noticed is it doesn't mix with the traditional way. So you either have to go DevOps full swing, or forget DevOps and don't do it. What we did is we tried to do it over the axis of our purchasing instructions. So where do we source our products from? If a product comes from the market that we have to facilitate, then we will buy these products from the market that we're in. If there's things that the market does way better than we do, then we buy them from the people that do it way better than we do, which is new because we used to do everything ourselves because we were living in splendid isolation. So we see that the advantages come from different platforms. We see mostly that we are either on the SaaS end of things, or we are on the on-premise, but we don't see many in-between forms for our startups. We mostly see that they buy things ready to go, ready to use, and not try to build something themselves on a platform. Now, these nice vendors are not aiming at any lock-in, of course, but they try to do whatever it takes to get you to buy more and more of their services or use their services more and get more of your money streams. So one of the things that you have to be careful is to know what is the aim and what is the goal and what is the development plans of the partner that you're teaming up with in the cloud. If we do it and we know that there's a lock-in game being played, then we have to know if it will not collide with other partners that we also use. So we make a strategic roadmap before we actually go into a cloud solution. Anyone having ICS systems here? Industrial control? Any SCADA in this? Yeah. You're not moving your SCADA into the cloud, I presume. So it's not happening for us either. Our control room will not go to the cloud anytime soon, and the SCADA will be the Achilles heel of our production. Now, Europe has a very big plan on privacy, and we have data of roughly 3 million households and maybe 100,000 companies. So we cannot just place anything in the cloud on anyone's cloud. We cannot just move it to AWS or Amazon. So we have to really be careful where we move what data and if it can be moved. Some can only be moved to our private cloud, which is in our own data centers. So we compete with the AWS. We have our own private clouds internally, so if we have to scale things, we can do that. If it is very privacy sensitive, what a difficult word. So we really have the ability to choose where we have the cloud landing depending on the privacy specs that we have to fulfill. One of the things that we also look at is what it does to our landscape, because usually people look at the functional perspective of a platform or software as a service, but they don't look at the protocols and data that have to be interchanged, or maybe at the security that is required. Now, you can think as your landscape as layers of data, of application, of transport. You can layer it from a vertical point of view or a horizontal point of view. And the problem is when you make your connections on various layers and then you introduce a vertical. One thing, for example, of a vertical is SAP HANA. It's an appliance if you buy the appliance, and there's only one or two ways to get in or out, and you have no clue what happens in the appliance, but there's an operating system, there is software, there is data, it's all in the appliance. That's a vertical. And dealing with verticals in a horizontally developed landscape is very difficult, and you never know what happens when you go to the cloud, because the ideas between the solution that you just bought might be totally different than in your data center and your historical landscape. That means that you will have to make sure that you manage your complexity up front. You have to know what it does with the number of combinations, the number of potential interfaces, the number of potential languages and protocols and data formats that you will have to handle. I can tell you from experience, we come from an 800 plus applications landscape down to 200 plus, and it's still messy as for protocols, as for data formats. So you have to make sure that someone in your company understands how to manage complexity, how to segment complexity into reasonable numbers and break down the problem into smaller portions that have minimal interfacing between them. This is a very difficult task. There's a very good book from Roger Sessions, an ex-Microsoft man, which I would like to tell you that is available online as well, mostly for free. What we therefore also do is that we try to see what type of servers we buy, and one of the things we would consider, for example, is a DRS, because we are a grid company, we're not supposed to be down, so we need to keep our IT up even though maybe the land is flooded, or maybe there's a storm or whatever hitting us. So we have to keep operations up at all times. So the Zerto guy was telling a really good story. In order to do that, we even bought our own telecoms company so that we're able to have connections between data centers, and we have connections between people, and we have connections into your homes when it counts. We also see that where the cloud is helping us is mostly at the systems of engagement area, and just a tiny bit of the systems of insight, because we have a lot of BI and analytics in-home, so we don't move that to the cloud that soon. We don't see it happening at these systems of automation at the moment, but when your Internet of Things gear at home starts connecting with us, then we will have to, because otherwise we can't steer your house. We cannot steer consumption. So there's a few things that we learned. That is that it doesn't mix DevOps with waterfall ways of working. We have totally different type cultures in our startups and in our participations than we have in our traditional operations. They don't mix either, and we place them separate, and we have separate purchasing and sourcing strategies for both groups. So there's things that we really do ourselves because it's what we know, it's the core of our business, it's the old traditional business. But if you're a startup, you're totally free to source whatever out of the cloud, whatever you want, at whatever price, as long as you can make a profit or you can make your business case work. That's it for now. I will take a few questions if you have them. Thank you.
Actually, if I may, I will start with one question. So you did show that Alliander is actually transforming or becoming a software company. So what is in front of you the major challenge in this, the one challenge that you think is most disruptive and you see in the future?
The one thing is that we have so many small new companies that we start around one theme that in the future we will of course see the integration question coming again. So we do architecture, we do strategy, consulting and architecture. Now architecture is not about what we need today, but it's about generations. So we need to think about what happens when this generation of companies is grown up and they sort of start to have synergies between them, and where are they and what will happen next, because they all have different platforms, they have different cloud providers, they have different protocols and data schemes. So we really have to make sure that we think about integration from today instead of starting when they ask for it.
What's the difference in hosting in the cloud for you as hosting it on premise, since most of your hosting is probably in external data centers as well, and hired external people to do it?
Yep. we don't really get a lot of advantage out of the private cloud, except that we're really certain that the privacy of whatever goes in there is guaranteed. Now, if we go to AWS, I'm pretty sure that they handle the thing very well, and maybe their security is even better than ours. But this is a decision from our, I would say, highest architect, the CEO. And whatever is privacy sensitive remains within our own premises until there is, I would say, clarity about the implications of the European guidelines. There are controllers of this guideline working as we speak, and they start to hand over fines to people who are not compliant. So we try to wait a bit that it settles before we take a newer stand.
Hello, I want to ask about the data set theory. You mentioned that we should reduce complexity before moving to the cloud, or is it like because you move to the cloud, the complexity will reduce?
No, I said that we should think about complexity because a cloud service is usually a stack of hardened software where you have you put in a plug and that is the protocol and data formats that you sort of bring over the line. Now, if your cloud service is cutting somewhere in half your data collections, or it has overlap, or it tries to eat some of your other data collections, or has a new protocol, then basically your complexity increases instead of decreases. So it is really your task as IT managers or people to think about this complexity addition or decrease before you allow any service in. That was my point.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much again. Very interesting discussion.